that's what drove me out of the band ultimately. Was I don't want to make it about anything other than me. I just couldn't handle that level of being in the spotlight. And I actually am so grateful at this point that I got out when I did, because I think it really would have gotten worse and worse.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, if you want to support the podcast, you can just go over to thiswasthescene.com, and on the top there's a little donate button, and you could just send a Venmo, like $1, or you can go sign up for my Patreon, which is $1 a month. So again, thiswasthescene.com, and you can go there and do that. It helps pay the bills for this shit. I'm guessing that the majority of you listening to this episode are here because you fucking know who Saves the Day is, and if you are a fan of the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene, you obviously know who the fuck they are, but if you don't, I'm just going to give you a little refresher here, and then I'll jump into all the bullet points and things about the episode. Saves the Day is an American rock band from Princeton, New Jersey that formed in 97. They released their debut studio album, Can't Slow Down, in 98. It was followed by Through Being Cool in 99, which featured their single Shoulder to the Wheel, and Stay What You Are was released in 2001, peaking at number 100 on the Billboard 200. It spawned 2 successful music videos on MTV2 for singles At Your Funeral and Freakish, and has since sold 300,000 copies. I feel like that has to have sold fucking more. I don't know when this was written on Wikipedia, but that seems a little low. Thank you to Andy Luca from the New Jersey pop punk 1994 to 2002 group on Facebook. I posted in the group if anyone had any connection to Bryan, and Andy said, yeah, here's his website, go click on that, and there's probably an email in there. So I emailed Bryan, was like, do you want to be in the podcast? And he replied really fast. He's like, yes, that would be fun. I mean, he worded it differently, but he was probably like, this is the greatest opportunity of my life. So that's just how I'm going to present it to you. So I got him on the Skype, and this is what we chat about. Quitting the band, the Earth Crisis Yogurt Show, sounding like Lifetime, Eben joining the band, the Stryder, Getting stage fright, Psychodelics, staying in Gerard Butler's apartment while recording Stay What You Are, the Jimmy Chamberlin story, In Reverie, and a ton more. This week's sponsor is Min 400 Records. Min 400 Records is an indie record label from New Jersey with bands across the United States, Canada, and Europe. The label features everything from indie rock and folk to post-punk and soul. Over 400 exciting releases. You can find Min 400 Records releases streaming on Spotify, Pandora, Tidal, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Deezer, and more, or at all MP3 outlets worldwide. Visit min400records.com for links and more info. Here's a clip from their artist Yawn Mower's song 16 Minutes from their forthcoming release To Each Their Own Coat.
16 minutes till it hits. My baby's on the pitch. And I'm left waiting for a kick.
Thank you, Mr. Sabatino, for always sponsoring the podcast. If you too would like to sponsor it and throw some money my way, just email this. I said email weird. Email thiswasthescene@gmail.com, and we can set something up. That's all I got to say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. I am so fucking stoked you're doing this. I love the early iterations of Saves the Day. Like Through Being Cool and Stay What You Are like my some of my all-time favorite records.
Nice.
Yeah, so this podcast is about that time period, the late 90s, early 2000s, and it's going to be cool to get I really want to get your perspective, actually, because you were one of, the OG guy in the band, and then left right where they started to kind of shift gears a little bit after Reverie, right?
Right before In Reverie, or working backwards just a little bit, I actually quit the band on my 22nd birthday, which took me about the rest of my 20s to process, I guess. But we'd just finished the Vagrant. I think it was the Vagrant America tour. Yeah, it was the Vagrant America tour, which was this big to do.
It was like Face to Face and Alkaline Trio and
Dashboard, Get Up Kids, and Rich Egan, who ran Vagrant at the time. I think was kind of enthralled with these hip hop, almost like not just like Death Row, but these other kind of hip hop labels who were trying to create this kind of, and they had a lot more money to do it. Just this whole swagger of these tours where they come into town and sort of it'd be the biggest thing happening. So anyway, he tried to do that with Vagrant. So I think that tour lost a ton of money because they got each of us these ridiculous buses, and it was both like a high for the band and like a personal low for me. It's just for a bunch of reasons, I was having a hard time. And so the tour ended on September 2nd, which is my birthday, 2001.
Oh shit.
You recognize the timing here. So,
Yeah.
so I talked to Chris that night. I think actually I hadn't really, I had pretty much just made up my mind at that point. Then the morning of September 11th, the tour was over. I didn't have much going on. So I took a Greyhound bus down to North Carolina to visit some friends on September 11th, fell asleep on the bus, woke up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. My friends, this is like in the era before, basically like real cell phones. They told me what had happened. And then it was really clear. I actually ended up staying in North Carolina for like the next 10 years. It was like a monumental shift in my life. That was a really crazy time between, September 2001 was obviously for everyone, it was a crazy time, but it overlapped with this major shift in my life too that had nothing to do with September 11th. But I think the cataclysmic nature of September 11th just kind of pushed me over the edge into like, I need to make a life change here. So I left Saves the Day. 3 months later, I'm living in North Carolina at that point, and I watched them on, I think it was
Conan, I think.
Conan. Yeah, they did Conan and they did Jimmy Kimmel, but I think Conan was the big one.
Is that when they got the dude from Braid to fill in?
Damon, yeah, that was great to see. I like Damon a lot, and he played with them for a while. I think the story goes he wanted to join Saves the Day, and they would have taken him, but I think that would have meant the end of Hey Mercedes, and Chris felt guilty about that or something like that. But yeah, so that was probably top 5 most surreal moments in my life, was watching them on Conan, yes, with some friends. And this is like, pre-real, again, like kind of pre-internet in the way we have it. So I literally was like watching it on TV in live time. And anyway.
So let's work back up to that, because that's a really interesting point. So I usually go back and ask how you get in the scene, and I'm going to ask you that in a second. And because I'm from New Jersey, and obviously this whole podcast started strictly about
Jersey. Where are you from?
So I'm from Jefferson.
I'm embarrassed to say I don't know where that is.
So that's like right by kind of like the Rockaway Mall.
Okay.
Yeah. Like the
Rockaway Mall.
The landmark. But I've lived in Hoboken, Morristown, Parsippany, like all North Jersey. And I was in a band, like we played in the scene. We actually played a show, I think, with you guys at Wayne Firehouse.
Oh my God, Wayne Firehouse.
We were on tour and someone gave us Can't Slow Down. And I'm sure, like, you've heard it many times. I was like, these guys sound like Lifetime.
Yeah.
And I was like,
yeah.
This is fucking great. And then when Through Being Cool came out, I was like, oh, these guys are on another level. Like, they figured out their sound, and then Say What You Are came out. I was like, oh, I was like, Jesus Christ. Like, there's like no stopping this fucking band. Until
there was, but I know for a while it seemed that way.
You were in my favorite part of the band, even though I did really like In Reverie.
Yeah.
Everything after that, I stopped. I kind of like was like, it wasn't really doing it for me.
I know. I feel sad about that. I feel like some of those albums never got their due, but I hear you. I mean, a lot of people I talk to say something very similar to what you're saying.
I like the style of the records that you're on, because there was just this raw, and I like your drumming. Like, it's just hard hitting, just like straightforward. And I really liked that sound that you brought to those records.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. It's like very relevant, or like, what's the word? Like, not in your face, or prevalent, I guess. So, like, the sound is just so, there's like this weird, there's a very Steve Evett sound to Stay What You Are, where it's like just compact and solid and straightforward. It's like very, there's like no slip ups or anything.
No, I know that. So he did Through Being Cool. It was actually Rob Schnaff who did Stay.
Oh, that's what I meant. I meant Through Being Cool.
Yeah, Through Being Cool is like ridiculously compressed and edited. Yeah, it's a very tight record.
So let's like work up to that, but like real quick, because I know I have a little bit of time here, but I would really love to ask so many questions. But like, so how did you get involved in the scene?
Oh, well, let's see. There's kind of like 2 simultaneous things that were happening. One is, so I actually went to school with Chris from starting in kindergarten. So I've known Chris since I was, God, what is kindergarten age? 6, 7, yeah. And we were in the same school through high school. We came from very privileged backgrounds, so we were at this private school in Princeton, New Jersey. He and I were like friends, but like, you're like a little kid, and we were into sports and whatever. And then there was this weird summer, and maybe like between seventh and eighth grade, where just somehow serendipitously I started playing drums. I'd gone to some camp and started learning drums, and he started playing guitar. And Chris is like a musical savant. Like, he completely self-taught. I mean, songwriting aside, just like as a guitarist, he was really advanced within like 6 months of picking up a guitar. It was crazy. And I never, I was definitely just his wingman. Like, I didn't have that kind of talent, but he and I just started jamming as kids in middle school do. And then this guy, Justin, who was in Saves the Day briefly, was also in school with us. And so we all played, at parents' basements for like every probably weekend day of eighth grade. So as that was happening, I also ended up falling in with the straight edge hardcore scene kind of by accident. I still to this day don't know quite what happened, but I got contacted by these older kids who were in a kind of established hardcore band who were connected with Mouthpiece, who was a band that our original bass player played with for a while, Sean.
Wait, what was the band that contacted you?
They were called A Nation in Transit. And they were like really, they were also kind of way past my level, not even just like musically. They were much older. I was like in eighth grade, but also just musical sophistication. Like, they were into a lot of Discord bands and just more like kind of DC art punk, and very cool. But anyway, they just turned me on to this whole world. I remember on the first album, this guy Alex in that band, he's like, "You've got to listen to this album. You'll change your life," or something. It was Gorilla Biscuits' Start Today. And it really did blow my mind. I mean, I had never really heard anything like that. I was listening to like Nirvana at that point, which, no shade at Nirvana, but I just didn't know this whole world existed. And then it's like especially in the pre-internet days, it's like you just start pulling threads, this band leads to that band. And then I started going to shows pretty young. In New Jersey, as you probably remember, or in that era, there was kind of distinct scenes, but they would kind of overlap. But there was like kind of the Wayne Firehouse scene, which was a little more like pop punk, maybe emo. But there was this whole other hardcore scene. A band like Lifetime kind of straddled the two a little bit. And I think that was part of their appeal. So I started going to shows, started hanging with older kids, started going to shows in Philly and all over New Jersey, starting like freshman year of high school, and was really into the scene. Felt like it was a place where I was finding some community that I really didn't even know that I wanted, essentially.
Do you remember some of the venues, like the Legion Halls or Firehouses and stuff?
Oh my God, yeah. Well, the best, and you've probably been there, is the Unitarian Church in Philly.
I've never been there. I've actually never been there.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah,
oh my God. Yeah, there's a great anecdote actually. Probably like sophomores in high school, and Chris and I went to see Lifetime. We were juniors. Saves the Day already existed, and we went to go see Lifetime at the Unitarian Church, which was a baller show. And they had Chris come up on stage and like sing backups for some song. And I was just like some kid in high school. I was like, what the hell is going on? But yeah, the Unitarian Church, it's a total fire trap. I mean, if there's ever a fire there, it's going to be, a disaster of epic proportions. But it's an amazing place. So I saw tons of bands just kind of like coming out of nowhere. Saw H2O kind of like even before their first 7-inch came out there. I was really into a bunch of these Philly bands that were very out there. There was a band called Ink and Dagger that were, remember them?
Yeah.
Prema. But, we'd have like just really cool stuff come through. Like I remember the Locust came through from San Diego, and that kind of blew my mind. So anyway, so there's like that scene, which was more like where I was outside of Saves the Day. Like that was more the music I was interested in. Even before Saves the Day, as you probably know, there's this band Settler that Chris and I started that initially is like a Smashing Pumpkins kind of like, alternative rock, like early 90s alternative rock when that was the thing. And then it kind of morphed as we changed into just like a straight up pop punk band. And so I was playing these pop punk shows with Settler, but I was kind of independently on my own going to these hardcore shows. And then I actually started putting on some shows myself at the Princeton Arts Council. Did you ever go to shows there?
I don't think so. Was it in Princeton?
It's right in downtown Princeton, and it's almost like something that could never exist today, where everything's so much more bureaucratic and it's almost like there were no adults watching or something, because you could just rent this place out for like $200 and put up flyers, go out to other shows, hand out flyers, because there's no internet. A few hundred kids would show up, and it was nuts. I mean, we had like Earth Crisis play there.
Is that the show where the kid came in with like a fur coat or something? It's on. There's a video of it on YouTube.
Yes, that was same era. That is at the Middlesex Community College. I was at that show too. That is an epically historic moment. Yeah, he like threw yogurt at.
Yes, that's John Cheese. I don't know if you know that guy. He
is that his name?
Yeah, he was a roadie for like My Chem and Piebald, and he's a character. Like everyone knows John Cheese, and I believe it was his interview where he told me about that story. So I had to look it up, and I was like, oh my god.
Oh my god, is that literally his last name?
No, it's his nickname, but
okay.
he just took it on. So he's a realtor in Maplewood, so he's like known as John Cheese.
That is a fabulous coded story. Yes, yeah. Like every 10 years or something, I'll go and watch that footage on YouTube of that Middlesex show. Yeah, so Middlesex Community College was another place. There was a place called the Melody Bar. Is that still?
Yeah, that's where. I'm staring at. I just got Lifetime's Jersey's Best Dancers in the mail on vinyl.
Oh, nice.
I'm staring at it right now, and their photo shoot was taken
famously at the Melody. Yes, that's where they did their last show. Yeah, so I would go to the Melody, which is insanely small. I mean, now it's probably another kind of total fire trap if I think about it, but great spot. And yeah, the vibe of the I love that your show is called This Was the Scene, because there is a was in this. Like, in other words, there was something that existed that doesn't exist at this point in that iteration, where I think if for no other reason, again, just the internet changed everything. In the pre-internet era, it's like it forced this searching quality, like, getting Very Distribution was this distribution company in Philly that you could basically get all your records from. I would get like this paper copy of the Very Distribution catalog in the mail. It's like 200 pages. And they had these very enigmatic little descriptions of every album or band. And I would just read these little things and sort of imagine what they're like, and maybe order the album, and maybe like randomly stumble upon them at a show a year later. And it was all very like magical in a way, and cloistered. Like there was like a price to entry. Like you'd have to find out about it somehow, which is always sort of weird. Like, how do people even find out? It seems, obviously that's most of human history, but in the pre-internet era, like, how did anyone find out about anything? I don't totally remember, but I do remember that it was really intimate, and, it was a lot of misfits that did not fit in to whatever, school world they were in. And we'd just show up at these things on the weekends and have this whole other world we were part of it. No one really understood outside of it. No one was really paying attention.
Well, that's what we were looking for. I think a lot of people didn't have that connection. A lot of people I've talked to, they didn't have that. It's almost like the same story where they didn't know they were looking for something. They didn't know what it was, and it just kind of showed up when they walked in these doors and they saw a show. They're like, holy shit, I'm here.
Absolutely. Yeah, something clicks. Like, yeah, I'm here. I was looking for this. I didn't even know I was looking for this. Exactly. Yeah, there's a magic to it. And yeah, if I sound nostalgic, it's because I am.
That's the point.
Yeah, exactly. Just brutal nostalgia.
So I'm just going to jump around just
For
because
sure, yeah.
I really want to cram this as much as possible. But even though, I've had conversations with people that have gone like 3 hours where we just talk and talk and talk. So I know. So I usually would kind of just take a little bit more time to break this apart. But I'm going to just jump into when you guys did Can't Slow Down. So at this point, you're going to shows, you're putting on shows. You guys changed, you go from stuff where you do Saves the Day, and then Can't Slow Down comes out. So I am jumping ahead, but when it comes out, and I'd mentioned before, when I was like, this sounds like Lifetime. Did you guys, when you wrote that record, were you pulling influences from a lot of local bands, and Lifetime was one of them? Or did you not think that you guys sounded like that at all?
Oh my God, I knew we sounded like Lifetime.
Okay.
We all did. I mean, remember, like, the consciousness of the people make it. We were 16 and 17 years old. Like, I don't know if you've hung out with 16 and 17 year olds lately, but when my friends have kids that are teenagers now and so on, I'm like, they are babies, like complete babies. Even college kids seem so young to me at this point, which is bizarre, but we were so just permeable and naive and young. And if it hadn't been for Sean McGrath, who was our original bass player, like I don't even know if Saves Today really would have come into being, because we didn't know what we were doing. We had this quirky band with this quirky name, this Seffler thing, and I forget how we got connected with Sean, kind of eluding me now, but he actually, he's the one who suggested the name Saves the Day. It's based on a lyric by a band, Farside, not the hip hop group, but this.
Yeah, Popeye.
Yeah, the Revelation band. We're just going with that. So basically, he's like, oh, you guys could do this and that and the other thing. And at that point, he wasn't even in the band. I think Chris was still playing bass, because we made the Saves the Day demo, which actually came before Cancel Out. Sorry, just jump backing up a sec. As Seffler, Sean came to Traxxas with Steve Evans. We hired Steve Evans to do this, which I'm not sure how we had the balls to ask him to do it, but somehow he did it, which was a miracle, because he had just produced Lifetime, who were basically like the second coming of Christ to us. And Sean was at the studio, and he was a bit older. He was at Rutgers. He was probably 4 or 5 years older, and to us was also just this kind of icon, because he had been in a couple big local bands, Mouthpiece being the biggest.
Oh, I didn't know he was in that.
Yeah, he was in Mouthpiece, and I think he quit to join Saves the Day. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. So shortly thereafter, it's probably less than a year, we went and did Cancel It Down, really raw. I mean, I think we did that whole record in like 4 or 5 days.
I just saw an interview with Chris, because he does a breakdown of Through Being Cool, and he says that you guys had 8 days and then you had 11 days for Through Being Cool.
Okay, I'll trust Chris's memory on that. That sounds right. I remember feeling. When I say remember, I'm remembering. I'm not even sure if it's a real memory. My sense is that it was really rushed, and we did it over winter break of our junior year of high school, which was a very fun way to spend my winter break. And then I remember, no, that's not right. Senior year. Okay, so we did a senior, and then it came out the summer after high school, because we did a U.S. tour, which I still can't believe any of our parents let us do. I mean, I was 18, most of the other people were 17, except for Sean, and we did the Cancel It Down tour, and the record came out about halfway through that tour. So like summer after high school.
And that was Equal Vision, right?
That was Equal Vision, who again, to us, were like huge icons. I mean, I was a huge Ray Cappo fan, Shelter and Youth of Today, and Steve, who runs Equal Vision, is a kind, or at least he started it, was a real icon in the scene, and we definitely kind of looked up to him. So that whole time period, because it's hard for me to really put in perspective even to myself, but we were high school kids. Like, we weren't even in college or out of high school, and so it was really, really young. And I think, going back to your original question, like, did we know we sounded like Lifetime? Like, I think we did, but I don't think we really knew what that meant, like what it means to like basically rip off another band's sound. I think you can really hear on that record, and then, I think you were kind of getting at this earlier, but like the progression from record to record of those first 3, it's like, as people, as musicians, but even just as like people who know about almost like the history of the scene and what it means to wear your influences on your sleeve or not, it took us a while to find our own sound. And Cancel It Down is really a bit of an homage to Lifetime and to other influences. Like that opening chord on Deciding is literally the way Start Today sounds by Gorilla Biscuits, that open E chord, that was pretty intentional, I think.
That was like one of the things that I remembered. I think you and I are around the same age. I might be a little older. I'm 43, so.
42.
Okay, so
you are my elder, yes.
Yes, I am. I'm the I'm the old one here. I remember because when we heard of you guys, we're like on tour or driving to a show or some shit, and then Sean, my drummer, put you guys in. He's like, "You guys check these out." He's like, "Yeah, the singer's like 16." I was like, "What the fuck? These guys are so young." Even though we were kind of like, I'm only a year older. But when I heard that, it was Jesus Christ. And then so. Like, do you feel, because when you guys did Through Being Cool, I felt that there might have been something like, okay, we're hearing this Lifetime stuff. This was our first album, Cancel It Down. Like, we got that out of the way. As we're growing, and I know I was watching this interview with Chris, and he was saying like he's at NYU with you, and he's taken this creative writing class, and that helps him kind of push past and into the next level. Did you feel that like going from Can't Slow Down to Through Being Cool, there was kind of a mission of we need to do something different because we don't want to be known as the Lifetime ripoff band?
Oh,
Not like you, it's like, no, you really were like that. Like you guys were established and good, but it was around you.
no, I mean, that was in there for sure. I mean, there's that. I don't know if it was like formulated exactly as that, but I know that was getting pretty tired. Have you heard the anecdote about when we were, I'm not sure if you've heard this from Chris or something, but he shares this in a lot of interviews when this question gets asked, but we were on that original tour, that summer tour after high school, and we were in Orange County, down by LA, and gosh, we were opening for Bane, big hardcore band. They were on tour with us, and nobody knew about us. The record hadn't come out. So imagine it's like these little kids from New Jersey showing up to your Orange County scene and like basically doing like a Lifetime covers show. And so we opened with Deciding, and like it's high energy and jumping around. The song ends, maybe 3 people clap, and then some dude at the back of the audience just not like scolding or not like even insulting, but just like matter of fact, but at a very loud volume says, "Hey, you guys sound like Lifetime." And Chris at that point was great when he was singing, but had like 0 stage presence between songs. And so he sort of just looks out at the guy, says, "You think so?" And the guy says, "Yes." And it's just crickets. And then I think we went into the next song.
I've never heard that story.
Oh my God. It was so good. I mean, even at the time, I remember thinking this is hilarious. But yeah, I think we came off that tour. The biggest difference, I think, I haven't listened to the albums in a while, but the biggest difference that I can think of between Can't Slow Down and Through Being Cool is just everything slowing down. I mean, it's hardly ballads or something, but we shifted away pretty dramatically from the, especially speaking as a drummer, like the up-tempo kind of like Fat Records, fake double bass beat, and everything went mid-tempo, except I think there's 2 tracks on Through Being Cool that are up-tempo, but that slowing things down, it just opened up a ton more space for musicality to come through. And
oh, totally.
The other thing that happened there, which obviously a lot of people who are into Saves the Day is one of the things they are most into in that era, is like we got Eben, who was, him and Chris were kind of equals, I'd say, musically. But Eben brought a level of musical sophistication that was way beyond, I think, what we were coming at with the first album.
Yeah, I met him because he played bass. I know he was in Yearly, but he also was doing like double duty where he was playing in Humble Beginnings. Do you remember that band?
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah. And he was in that, and then I was having a conversation with Josh from Humble, and he's like, "Yeah, I think." He's like, "Eben's gonna leave the band." He's like, "He's gonna go to Saves the Day." I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And the next thing is like, "Yeah, this is Eben and Saves the Day." I was like, "Holy shit!" Yeah, he's a sick bassist.
He is a sick bassist, and just musically, like, was a bit more sophisticated than the rest of us, and maybe not Chris, but still. So anyway, it pushed us way past where we had previously kind of limited ourselves, and Chris's songwriting really started to take off at that point too. Can't Slow Down. It's a very cool record, partially because it's not the songs on it. There's not a lot of like verse, chorus, verse stuff. It's just sort of this like progressive. I think we took this from Lifetime, where Lifetime kind of, obviously they didn't invent this, but for us, they really brought it to the forefront. Like you can have these songs that like have these incredible musical arcs without having to like resort to the like verse chorus structure, and they sort of like just these sort of parts that blend into other parts, but that's not like a pop structure. That's like something else. And so Chris, I think this just happened way to 100x before Stay What You Are, but even right before kind of Through Being Cool, I think, he started to listen more to, stuff outside of the scene, and particularly the Beatles. But Chris was always into like, even in that era, like he was always listening to like Aerosmith and what else was he into at that point? Like stuff that was like totally non sequitur, but had like these really impressive pop sensibilities. And so he was trying to like bring some of this like more mainstream. By mainstream, I just mean more like pop, essentially, elements into what we were doing. And so that's, I think, the magic of Through Being Cool is it's there's like a whole leap in songwriting that happens at that point from Can't Slow Down to something that resembles more like, for better and worse. And I have a lot of mixed feelings about this, but it starts to move much more towards the mainstream at that point.
He had said in an interview, and you guys were cranking Foo Fighters, Color and the Shape, and then
That's right, exactly. Yes, that is the one. Yeah,
and Refuse, Shapes of Punk to Come, or Shape of Punk to Come.
yeah, that's right.
So I actually wrote this down. Like, how much of that did you pull from as an influence for the drums in that record, Through Being Cool?
Through Being Cool. Oh man, I mean, I would never say I could. I mean, Dave Grohl. I mean, Dave Grohl played drums on Color and Shape, and
Or like as an influence, though. I mean, it doesn't have to be like your match, like, but you're like, oh, I love this tempo change or something like that.
yeah, I think that's where my abilities came through. Less like I was never like super technically proficient, but I can say more about this. But I think this is why the magic of those first three albums is it's not just me, but the five of us coming together. We kind of like exceeded like the sum exceeded the total of the parts or something, where we all were like really musically aware by that point. So it's like I would hear things that drummers did and I might not be able to do it or something, but I would be inspired by almost like how do I put it? The musical vibe that drums were bringing to songs more than like I was never into songs for drums really. I was way more into melody, but I was always into these bands where the drums play to the song rather than the other way around. Ultimately, like, because this is what happened to Save City in general, like on all fronts, the Beatles became kind of like the template for that for me, but also for I think Chris for other parts of the songwriting process. But where it's seemingly quite simple, but it's like I'm not saying this is what I was able to do, but the idea is to like perfectly fit the drums and whatever other elements are going on to the song itself, the songwriting process, rather than sort of them taking center stage. And I do think that's something even to this day, like when I'm appreciating drums on an album, it's really like how they're playing to the song. And it's rarely like, oh, that's some like insane fill. I mean, sometimes the fill's amazing because it's playing to the song. Like I was just listening to the new Cave-In album. I don't know if you know them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and their drummer, I can't remember his name. Amazing drummer, pretty technical, but so musical, and really gets what I think I'm trying to speak to, which is all of this was all of what we were doing was trying to serve Chris's songwriting because that was our ticket to ride, as it were. Like it was not ultimately like as amazing of a bass player as Eben was, or however much I could, pull out of the drums. Like we were there because of Chris, and we were there not because of Chris's voice, because of his songwriting. I mean, we were there almost like, Chris has a really challenging voice for a lot of people, and it speaks to not that he's a bad singer, it's just what his natural voice is. But it speaks to the power of his songwriting that it's almost like Saves the Day succeeded in spite of that, in spite of his voice.
I kind of disagree. I loved his voice. I thought his voice on the first three records was so raw. Like, but Can't Slow Down. On Stay What You Are. That's when it morphed to being more high and like in what it is now.
Yeah, it's a intermediate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so raw because when he hits that like that. The rather forget, like when his voice breaks when he's screaming that part.
I know
that when I heard that song, I was floored. I was like, I'm fucking done. Like, holy shit. I was like, I should stop writing songs because that part blew my fucking mind.
Yeah. I think we actually pushed him to like almost hurt his voice in the studio there because we knew that was a kind of make or break moment on that album. That's like the end of side one on the vinyl, and it's epic.
It's so fucking great. Is that My Sweet Fracture?
Yeah, it was My Sweet Fracture. But I mean, Mike, even and I agree. I mean, I like Chris's voice on those albums too, but it was always, even back then, half people loved it, half the people hated it.
Really? I never heard that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it got more pronounced as time went on, but maybe hated is too strong a word, but it seems like
Little resistance from some.
little resistance. And again, just coming back to like what I was saying, it's like the songwriting was the superpower of that band and Chris's superpower.
Yeah, and to that point too, because I felt that you guys did write, as you're saying this, like what you guys brought to the table centered around making what it was coming out of his head work. Because I knew Eben from, I knew of him, or I met him a couple times, and just how he would just be like going nuts on bass. I felt that he really didn't do that on songs. Like there'd be some parts where he'd kind of fiddle a little bit, but it went right back into very structured to make the song happen and not make it like the Eben show.
Exactly. And it could have been. I mean, I know some of the yearly stuff before that really was like a kind of like Victor Wooten bass solo or something. And he reined it in. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of Eben's genius, is he's an amazing bass player, but he also had this incredible ear kind of for what we're talking about, of like how to make us, bass gets really lost in so many conversations. It's kind of amazing how much it played a role in Saves the Day, but he really, really played to the song. And as the other half of the rhythm section with him, I mean, he was so much more advanced than me. So I actually kind of would often simplify stuff on my end just to give his stuff more room to breathe, because what he was able to come up with was way better than what I could come up with.
I actually read an interview, and I brought this up once because I was talking to Scotty from the Stryder. I interviewed him, and and we were talking about you guys because he had brought up that At Your Funeral was about them.
Is it?
Yeah, well, that's what he said that, and then there's an interview with Chris, and Chris is like, I'm not going to say the band's name, but he's telling the story, and I was like, this is such an interesting thing, but he he was like, he was talking about you and Eben, and he was like, just the fact you're saying you kind of like would kind of simplify it. Yeah, he was like, you guys, there was like a little bit of a, I don't say a riff, but like there was kind of, you guys butted heads a little bit, and then I read an interview. I thought that that you had done, and you were like, yeah, like it was kind of hard because he would kind of ride me about certain songs because of like, well, I wasn't doing something.
Oh yeah, no, I mean,
and I'm not looking to talk shit or anything. I'm just,
no. I mean, yeah, there's a whole thing here. I mean, absolutely, Eben was such a superior musician to me that there was some tension there on that level. And then there was just like a cultural tension between him and the rest of us, because he was from Long Island, we were from Jersey, grew up in completely different worlds, and he was kind of like a hired gun initially, at least, who came in. And I think, he struggled to feel like he was, I don't know how to put it, but like one of us or something. And as much as I think we tried to make that the case, I don't think that ever really got resolved. And then of course, there's just the kind of horrible ending him and Chris came to that did not go well. But yeah, I mean, I was, let's see, at that point I'm like 20, probably 20 years old, super insecure. I think from that place, yeah, it was Eben and I got into it a little bit. But even back then I was like, man, we're so lucky to have this guy. And, as the years gone on, I've just appreciated that more and more. And it's kind of like my ego takes a back seat. But there was definitely, I mean, the original beef between us and Stryder is we stole Eben. I mean, essentially.
Yeah.
I think we pilfered him from their orbit. And I don't think that ever really, we were so immature, all of us, including them. I don't think that ever really got like worked out in some like real way. It just was like animosity and posturing and whatever.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of still there. Like, not with you, but like I've seen other interviews with both sides, and I was like, oh, there's still a thing. Like, it's wild.
Right?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
I mean, there's the Jersey Long Island tension that, like, that obviously goes beyond. They were from a really different world than we were, and I think it's hard to overstate like how sheltered Chris and I were, and to some extent Ted, because he came from a parallel world up in Ithaca, New York, where we all were, in these upper middle class families and super sheltered and whatever. And these Long Island kids, that's not the world they came from.
Did it, to like that point, did it kind of like, were you aware when you guys started popping off?
Oh, sorry, what do you mean?
Like when you guys started just showing up at shows and you're like, oh, we're not playing to 6 people anymore. Like we're filling the fucking room consistently here.
Yeah,
And they're singing these songs back like louder than Chris.
yeah, yeah. The first moment I remember that feeling, I think you're getting it, was at the end of the Can't Slow Down tour, where we ended that tour at the Melody Bar in New Brunswick. Now this is like pre-Eben, so Sean was still playing bass for us. And so we get back to New Jersey, the records come out, and like 200 people showed up, which was a lot, for the Melody Bar and for us. And they, to your point, like everyone knows the songs now because the records come out. And I think that was the moment something clicked for me, like, oh, this is a thing. Like we could really make this happen.
Were you nervous about that?
I was, and it grew. I mean, that's part of what we're kind of jumping ahead here, but
That's fine.
ultimately me leaving, I was so, and I know this is only got more extreme after I left, but by the end of that Stay What You Are tour, I mean, I didn't really know if I had any real friends left, because it was very unclear who was just there because of the band and who was an actual friend. And crowd sizes were growing and growing. And, at that point I was watching other friends kind of like do other things in the world that seemed more interesting. But yeah, I'm wonder if it would happen now, but there would be some threshold where I would get stage fright. Like once it got past like a couple thousand people in the audience, something would happen in my brain and I would get stage fright, which didn't happen at these smaller shows, but it started to happen. And I think it's like this weird thing that would happen when you're on such a big stage where you can't see the audience. Like literally you're blinded by the lights. It sounds so dramatic, but you can't see them. And I don't know, different people respond to that in different ways. My nervous system would kind of panic. It would dissipate kind of as the show went on, but it was really uncomfortable.
I can imagine, man. I mean, you guys went from, I remember seeing you at the Wayne Firehouse, and I think this is when Through Being Cool was out. And there was, it was in the back room. It wasn't in the main room where Ricky used to put on shows. It was like,
oh, the back room. Yeah.
it was smaller, and there was always like a good amount of kids there. But then to go from that, and then everyone I knew had your guys both CDs at that time.
Yes.
So like,
shout out CDs.
yeah, seriously, that old technology. I don't know. Yeah, just to have that just kind of blow up like that so fast. Either you're just going to go along with the ride, or you're going to stop and be like, wait a minute, this is am I? It's almost like you feel like a little imposter syndrome, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, for sure. I'm saying this 20 years later, but I realized it much earlier that it's too much for a young person in their early 20s to be treated that specially. Like, it's just not normal. It's not right. And it didn't, it really, honestly, I think it was pretty damaging to many of us in our mental health. I know, just speaking very broadly here, but there's been a lot of mental health struggles in the Saves the Day alumni, and myself included. And I do chalk some of that up to just being way too overexposed way too early. And really, the thing is like, that's never going to last. And when it crashes really hard. And that's sort of like the last, sadly, Saves the Day's been on like a slow motion car crash for years now. But even at that era, my sense of self would go up and down based on like, did the show sell out or not? And, how am I being treated? And just stuff that honestly is so peripheral to the music, but ends up sort of taking over. It started taking over pretty quickly. And that's what drove me out of the band ultimately. Was I don't want to make it about anything other than me. I just couldn't handle that level of being in the spotlight. it didn't, and I actually am so grateful at this point that I got out when I did, because I think it really would have gotten worse and worse.
No shit.
Yeah, yeah. And other people, are just more constitutionally suited to that. But, going back in our conversation, you're like, none of that is why I got into this thing to begin with. Like, I was into this tiny community where you play these shows in front of like your friends and maybe 50 other people, and go hang out at the 7-Eleven afterwards or something in Philly. I mean, that's what my original inspiration for getting into the scene was to begin with. But the thing is, I hitched my ride to Chris Connelly, and the dude is a monster songwriter, and so I was just riding that. Everything I say sounds like a cliche right now, but just riding that train it just started taking off because the dude is, a musical genius in a lot of ways.
So to that point, and I'm just cutting you off just because we're kind of running.
Yeah. Oh, and Mike, I can actually go to 12:15 here. I just got
awesome. Yeah. All right, perfect. So Through Being Cool comes out, you guys are elevating, and then you guys go in to record Stay What You Are, and then it comes out. Like, so in the process of recording it, were you listening to these songs? I mean, are you just hearing them like, holy shit, this record's going to blow the other one out of the water?
Yes.
It's wild.
What Chris would do this is so awesome. He had a little Tascam 4-track, and he would demo the songs where he would play he would go in his basement, his mother's basement to be completely accurate here. And he would, I'm not sure if he wasn't a very good drummer, but he was, even with drums, he was kind of musical. So some of the stuff he would play on these little demos, I would actually steal and like kind of clean up. Anyway, he would basically 4-tracked by himself all of Stay What You Are, plus like a bunch of other songs that we weeded out. But I remember I was living with Ted in Brooklyn at the time. And I remember just us on these cassette tapes that Chris would give us, because we'd go down to see him in Princeton like every few days, and we just go and listen to these tapes and just be like, what on earth is this? And I remember, I think I remember hearing At Your Funeral for the first time and being like that's a legitimate hit, like way beyond anything he had come up with previous. And I remember thinking, well, we were all thinking, yeah, this is basically going to be huge. But then we were also getting told that by a lot of people
who were hearing the demos, or who
were hearing the demos, and we're reading the tea leaves in the not just like the scene, but kind of like music at large at that point. Like, there was this Get Up Kids were starting to blow up, and there was this like a kind of a waiting game of like who's going to be the first, putting these in like big air quotes here, but emo band to blow up. And a lot of people thought it was going to be us. And so even then, major labels were starting to kind of contact us and so on. And, Vagrant was kind of like a quasi major label of sorts. So yeah, and that's also when I think the ego inflation started to really kick in, because, you're 20 years old, 21 years old at that point, being told, basically, in 3 years you're going to be, on tour with Foo Fighters or something. You start to, there's no reason not to believe it based on who's telling you that. And then there's no like checks or balances. There's no one saying anything else in our ears. So we just rolled with it and really, really went into that Stay What You Are recording process from like this place of like incredible confidence in what we were doing. And I think that really does come across in that album. Like, it's like a leap in maturity.
Oh, totally.
That is hard to convey. And, there was other factors. I don't know how much you've heard about this part, but like definitely kind of everyone except for Eben we got very into psychedelics. And so that's part of the sound change you hear going into Stay What You Are. Like,
I've never heard that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, big part. Beatles, psychedelics. I mean, we were in some fantasy land of like thinking we were some like 1960s rock stars or something. But yeah, the psychedelic thing was huge. I mean, that also played into me leaving eventually. Like, I just, all the albums we made, the only one I can actually listen to that I played on is Stay What You Are. The other ones just sounds so young to me in a way that this is a weird thing to say, but I think because we were so sheltered, the psychedelic thing helped us, especially I think me, Chris, and Ted, just kind of like grow up very quickly. Not even necessarily like maturity wise, but like awareness of the greater musical world and like what influences we could bring in, and that there's a world outside of this little scene we're in. And, and a lot of the lyrics in Stay What You Are a huge jump for Chris. There's some of this, but singing about girls is like a lot of Through Being Cool to like, talking, half the songs on Stay What You Are about like existential dread and death, and that stuff is all, This Is Not an Exit is basically our, LSD song. That is a full on LSD song. That's where that comes from for sure. Lyrically.
Shit,
and
that's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Wow.
So we roll into LA in this super heady mindset, and at that point, the whole straight edge thing, we were way moved outside of that. So there's a lot of drugs and a lot of, not like we were being bad people, but it was just totally uncontained. We were in this apartment in West Hollywood that Vagrant paid for us to be in, that we were subletting from this actor, Gerard Butler, who,
Holy shit. Yeah, he was in
like
the
in like 300, or was he in 300?
Yeah. He's fucking Leonidas, I think.
So I think, Mike, that he basically had one of the costumes from 300 in one of the closets.
Get the fuck out of here.
I kid you not. Or it was like a mock-up of one of the costumes, because he had basically moved everything out for us to be there, except for some insane costume that, of course, I think was worn at different times by different people in the band. But that was an amazing experience. We had 2 months with Rob Schnaff, who had just finished, I think he had just done an Elliott Smith record before that. And we were just huge Elliott Smith fans. And, he was someone who, again, kind of was outside of the scene and just musically really sophisticated. And he brought a level of, because we actually had him for a couple weeks before we even started recording, just in a practice studio, and he helped us pare down songs. Like Jukebox Breakdown, I think originally was about another minute and a half longer, and he cut out a bunch of fluff, and he would kind of made a lot of those songs punchier than they would have been otherwise, even before the kind of recording process. And Cars and Calories, Chris wrote about a week before we started recording. He wrote that in LA, and that was just Chris of that era. Literally, he'd wake up and like, he's like, I think I have a song, and like within like 2 hours, he'd have Cars and Calories like almost completely finished. It was insane.
That's so nuts.
It was insane, yeah.
I was talking to somebody the other day about it was an interview I was doing this week, and we were talking about like the best, and it's pretty known out there. Even like I say this all the time, like Brendan from Lawrence Arms, who was in like Slapstick back in the day, like he talks about how he only gives himself, I think, like 5 minutes to write a song or something. He's like,
is that right?
Yeah, he's like, if I can't do it in that time, he's like, I just get rid of it, because every great song out there, the person always says, oh yeah, I just wrote it in like a minute or something.
Yes. And that described, that's a great quote. And I've heard this described about the band Saves the Day of that era, those first 3 albums. It's like this kind of lightning in a bottle idea, where it could never get replicated, because there was something about like how spontaneous it was. And you said raw, and Chris really was just sort of like almost like birthing these songs like constantly in this really extreme way that, open secret here, but like, yeah, definitely drugs helped. That's pushed him into all sorts of different musical territories, and a lot of those weird chord changes on Stay What You Are. A lot of that comes from just, it sounds so ridiculously tropish, but just, there was a real shift in consciousness there.
Were you guys like kind of full of, I don't want to say like this shitting on you anyway, but like just self-reflective wise, were you guys a little full of yourselves at that point?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Mixed with like this like false humility of feeling like we were learning sort of these life lessons. A lot of it comes across in Stay What You Are. It's almost these like polemic songs about like how to deal with life or something. So we felt like, there's some like wisdom there, but it's wrapped up in like a 20-year-old's brain. So it's sort of a weird combination of there was something real there, but also just really, really young. And yeah, totally. Definitely, if I think about it too hard, there's just so much cringe from my past in that era that I really regret. A lot of it being just not treating people well from a place of, being in Saves Today and feeling kind of untouchable and whatever. And yeah, definitely we were full of ourselves, but, we were also, I give us like a little bit of a break just because of the age thing and like not knowing better. But yeah, there's definitely quite a few interactions I would like to go back and change.
Well, you're 21 at this point, right?
I'm 21. Yeah. So this is like, gosh, early spring 2001 is when or maybe fall of 2000. One of those two is when we're in LA.
Yeah, because you quit right before 9/11.
Right. So the album comes out. We went to Japan in like June, and then the album came out something like this right before this Vagrant America tour. And and then I left in that September.
I think the one thing that really showed me, and I'm definitely watching the time too, we're at 3:07.
Yeah, we can go a little over here. It's okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just be like, hey man, we gotta really stop it.
Okay, thanks.
If people get lost in this because you said before, like you love.
It's so fun. Yeah, you never get to talk about it.
Yeah, because the nostalgia. It's great to remember that too. It's just for me, it's wild because you guys that CD was such a huge thing for me, and I remember this, and I'm just gonna have to just tell you the truth here.
The Stay What You Are.
Yeah, like I was hanging out with this girl, and this is like the summer where when that album came out was where I was like single for the first time in like 5 years. So I was like, all right, I'm just going on like,
oh my goodness,
I'm just going on like a quote unquote dating spree here.
Nice, as one should.
Yeah, I was like, it's time to make up for lost time. I'm hanging out with this girl and she puts this like CD in and I was like, what is this? She's like, it's the new Save Today, and it was a burned copy. And she gave me one. So I think I did finally buy it later on, but it was before the record came out, so I had a copy of it before it officially came out.
Oh, nice. Some kind of illicit contraband copy.
Yeah, like however, it's so funny how records leaked back then. You're like, it's from the studio. Like, how the fuck else would this get out?
I know. I really actually have no answer to that. I know what you're talking about.
Well, I didn't even think about that. That question popped up. Do you know how? Because your record did leak before. Because obviously, I had a copy. Was it all out there, or is it like before you guys launched? Like, did you guys hear like, oh shit, people have this already?
My memory is not reliable around this, but my guess is that we probably gave copies to friends, and it just sort of, by that point, then it's sort of out of our hands, and it would just spread like a contraband CD plague. But yeah, I think I remember giving copies to friends and be like, oh, don't whatever, give this to anyone else. But of course, like that's.
Yeah, and I'm in New Jersey getting it from some girl.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Holy shit. Well, the one thing, it's like when the record came out too, there's a big difference. And I had heard that you did the artwork for Through Being Cool. Like you and someone else in your college, like you guys did the layout for that?
I believe so, yeah. And for Stay What You Are.
Oh, you did for Stay What You Are too?
Yeah, I did all the photography on that.
Oh shit. Okay. Actually, I just talked to, he worked at this skate shop called Small Empire, New Jersey. Jeremy Weiss. So.
Oh, Jeremy Weiss. Yeah. Oh, Jeremy's great.
Yeah. So he said he did like the headshots of you guys that are in that record.
That sounds right. Yes.
Okay. But you did the, like all the, like you took the photo of who's walking? Is that Dave walking?
That's Dave. Yeah. And all the little, I think I did all the photo, maybe all of them except for a few that Jeremy did in the interior too. All the kind of little snapshots and stuff.
But like when I saw that and like the sound progressed, like it seemed there was this mature thing. I was thinking of like kind of a similarity here because you brought the Beatles up before, and it's almost like when the Beatles went from wearing suits to just being full on hippies and shit.
Yeah, yeah.
There was this polished look that you guys had in the first two records, and then you guys looked a lot more just kind of like let your hair down, I guess you could say, by the time Stay What You Are came out.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like there's a bunch of things happening there. I mean, definitely drugs. I'm trying to find a better way of putting that.
I think that was like kind of my comparison because it was like that's what happened to the Beatles. They just basically got an LSD and they're like, oh, let's grow mustaches.
Totally. And just, I mean, my aesthetic interests and I think all our interests just changed so radically. And this Stay What You Are, the title is obviously supposed to be like a little bit of like a throwing you off thing because obviously we didn't stay as we were. I mean, it's like a dramatic change from Through Being Cool. But, the other part of the Stay What You Are meaning there to some extent, I think is just, yeah, letting go of some of the adolescent just presentationalism and stupidity and trying to be a little more heart-centered and a little bit more mature. Obviously, at this point, it all seems pretty immature to me, but nonetheless, I think that was a bit of the ethos there. Have you ever heard the story about how the Stay What You Are title came about?
No.
Oh, this is so random. We were on tour in Canada. We were in Montreal. This is like 6 months before we went to California to record it, and very, very inebriated. This French Canadian woman, kind of flamboyantly beautiful, but very inebriated French woman, walking down the street towards us, bumps into Chris, I think, and looks him in the eye and says, in French, fingers means fingers. Stay what you are. That's where the title came from.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Like when that happened, were you guys in the middle of recording the record or writing the songs?
Yeah, I think it's the era. It's like a parallel when Chris is doing these Tascam recordings on the 4-track.
Did you like someone turn and say, that's the name of the album? Or did this come later on?
In my memory, yes. In my memory, someone's like, that's a fucking great record title.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Looking back, did you find there was just points where shit would just happen, the crazy shit would happen to you guys on a daily basis or every other day where you're like, is this like real life right now?
Yes. And I will, this is your other question. This is summer.
It goes along with the question being like, is there a story you've wanted to tell and you've never told before?
Totally. Absolutely. And so the Vagrant America tour, this is that last tour before I lost my mind and left. We had a 3-day stretch at the House of Blues in Chicago, which is, if my memory serves me correctly, it's a venue, but there's a hotel attached to it. So basically we're like almost like one of these weird like Vegas residencies that like Taylor Swift would do or something, where you're just like living at the hotel and like wander down at like 5 p.m. and like play a show and then go back to your room and have room service. Yeah, it was totally insane and way over the top. Anyway, so like I think on the third night, I think it was the third night, we play the show and I'm backstage. I think everyone else is gone at this point. For some reason, I'm just sitting back there, and in walks Jimmy Chamberlin from the Smashing Pumpkins, who was like a total drum idol of mine. But like already I can tell something's off. Like he's totally bug-eyed. Looks like he hasn't slept in like 3 days. And he's like, I'm Jimmy Chamberlin. And like, I want you to come back to my house right now. We're going to do a drum solo. And so I'm like, absolutely, that's what we're going to do. And somehow like, and the sad thing is, this is that same era where, I don't know if you remember, their keyboardist died of like a
heroin.
Heroin. This is like literally the same month. So it's actually a very dark story in some ways. And he was sadly, I think, really caught up in this. So anyway, he's totally coked out. And instead of us, quote, going to his house and doing a drum solo, like a little mouse, I'm following him around the House of Blues as he like, I don't know, I don't even remember what, like almost like I'm on some weird adventure with like my middle school idol, but he turns out he's like completely insane and coked out of his mind. But I like regressed to this younger state. I'm like following him around. Anyway, eventually I'm like, well, I got to take you to meet the guys. So we like go up to this hotel room where everyone is because it's in the same venue. And I opened the door. I'm like, hey guys, it's Jimmy Chamberlin. And he comes in, and I think at this point I had like kind of lost track of how insane this man looked at this point. And everyone, there's like a moment in my mind where like everyone turns, and it's like this moment of like elation, and there's just like horror on everyone's face seeing this guy, poor Jimmy Chamberlin, just like not in a good place. And I sort of like read the room quickly. I was like, okay, never mind. And I kind of wandered off with him again. And anyway, that was like my brief Smashing Pumpkins overlap.
That's like right when he got kicked out the first. Oh, no, he's back in the band, but that's when he cleaned up.
He's back in the band. I know. That's the sad, the thing is with a lot of funny band stories, if you dig, it's always like hovering above like just some den of just total darkness because, people get kicked out of bands for lots of reasons, but usually it's because usually they're in some horrible state and, it's totally toxic and bad and maybe even dangerous. And it seems funny from the outside. Even that story, I know it's bizarre and funny, but it's like, it's just right above the fact that like this dude was not well. And quite frankly, we weren't that well either at that point. I mean, saves the day. We were, way too much substance use. And, it was kind of a way too heady of a time for a 21-year-old to be in.
From looking back on it too, like you wrote monster records. You're in this like scene that's I don't know, people are just flocking to eat this shit up. You guys are like all good looking dudes. I mean, I can imagine just you guys being like, we have the fucking world by the balls right now. Like,
yes. Yeah, it's true.
And then I can imagine you need to take the edge off somehow. And then you just go and you're like, oh, let me put this in my mouth. Like,
oh my God, absolutely. And, there's like, in Buddhism, they talk about these heaven realms where, beings will go for, eons and eons, and basically whatever they think of just immediately kind of appears to them. And that's basically what it was like then. Like if you thought of it, it would just appear. And the trick with the God realm thing is the minute it starts to fall apart, it falls apart really dramatically because you start getting used to a certain way of being treated, which is totally unreal and not human, really. And when it starts to fall apart, it falls apart really badly.
I mean, it sounds like for when you were saying it when you left, like that's what happened. Like it just all came to a head, and you're like, "Fuck, I got to get out of here."
Yeah, it was a very, very, very tough time for me. And strange coda to this story for me is I quit on September 11th.
Or you quit on the 2nd or the 11th?
Sorry. Yeah, I quit on the 2nd, really quit on the 11th in my brain. And then I think we did one more show with me already having quit at the end of September. It was like some weird radio show up in Pennsylvania. I was in such a existential mindfuck of a place. What I ended up doing is very, very, very bizarre relative to everything we just talked about. I actually went and lived in Nepal for 6 months, starting in that January.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Ended up spending a lot of my 20s in India and Nepal. So I that happened for a lot of reasons. Part of it was I was so overwhelmed by the last 4 years of this like meteoric rise of the band. And there's a lot of good stuff in it, as we're talking about, but the impact it had on me personally was a little overwhelming. And so I had to go to literally brought myself to a place where nobody knew about Saves the Day. Although this is my final last little funny story here. So
yeah. You can keep talking for as long as you want, dude. Like, I got time, man. I'm not going anywhere.
Okay. Yeah. No, I just gotta see a man about an office here in a little bit. But so a couple of my buddies come over that summer. I'm living in Kathmandu, Nepal. This is like less than a year after I left the band, and we decided to go to Tibet overland in a van. We get to Lhasa, which is the capital of Tibet. We're staying at a guest house. My girlfriend at the time is there. And I shit you not, we're in Lhasa, Tibet, which is, especially in pre-internet world, I mean, you might as well be in, you are on the other side of the earth, but just completely cut off from Western culture altogether. And I wake up in the morning and someone in the room across this like a little courtyard from me is playing At Your Funeral. And then I realized there's no
escape.
There's no escape from my own life, which is a good lesson anyway.
That's a fucking. I was gonna say, I was like, I'm pretty sure the CD or the record got pretty far around the country, around the world.
Yes, further than I could have imagined.
I had like one thing that I thought of, and I can't fucking remember it. I don't think it was that important, but it was like something that popped up in my brain. I remembered it. When In Reverie came out and it didn't do that well, did you what were your thoughts about that?
Yeah. It's a great question. Gosh, I remember. So Chris came to visit. So I come back from Asia. I'm living in North Carolina. I go back to college. So I was at UNC Chapel Hill, and Chris came and stayed with me for a few days. And he had the In Reverie, not even the demos. I think they had already recorded it. And I remember just being really worried. I thought the songs were great and everything, but Chris was being told by the DreamWorks people that literally they're going to be the next Beatles or something, like something just completely insane. And so I could see how sort of inflated he had become. Not like he was full of himself, but just more like he was really believing that, this was some great art that was going to change the world. I was like, this is good songs, but man, like, this is still just like a pop punk record. Like, that's what I remember thinking to myself. And so I started seeing the writing on the wall, like, oh, this is going to be a hard fall. And part of me is like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this really will take off. And when it didn't, it was really painful. And I was worried about Chris. He really took it hard, as I think everyone knows at this point, and was not in a good place. And, and then him and Eben had a falling out.
Yeah, I never heard about that. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but you had said it earlier, and I was like, oh, I knew that he quit, but I didn't know there was like a riff or anything.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this, but I'm pretty sure there's this song on their latest album, that self-titled album, not the self-titled, 9, I guess it's called, that is about him.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I don't totally know what happened. I know it came to a head. They were on tour in Europe, and I think they almost got in a fight. Anyway, I'm sort of speaking past my own knowledge, but it was kind of like watching this thing unravel. It was a bit of not Schadenfreude, because I didn't want them to fail, but it was a bit like, oh, this is sort of why I was got out when I did, a little bit. Like, I could just see like their ambition had exceeded what was actually going to happen here in terms of their impact. And
there's a point sorry to cut you off, but there's like a point to what you're saying where you start to think you can't do anything wrong, so you start. I think there's a point of trying to push the boundaries musically, where you're going, okay, let's do something different, but if you add to that, we can't fail, so we could do whatever the fuck we want to.
Yeah, and the we can't fail thing, that's right, is so damaging and dangerous, because like the musical industry is a fickle beast, and it's not, it's almost like I'm trying to think of an example, but almost like someone who's really well in high school and college and maybe in grad school, and then like get out in the job market, and like it's not like the world just becomes their oyster all of a sudden. That's a little bit what Saves the Day, because by the time you graduate to DreamWorks, like there's real money getting thrown around. These people are not messing around, and it's ruthless. Like they got cut, I think, a month after the album came out.
Oh yeah, I think didn't the label like collapsed like soon after?
It did. And a funny thing to know is so that In Reverie record deal is one of the maybe the last, if not one of the last, kind of great meaning like incredibly good for the band record deals of the CD era. All those guys, and this this is maybe a regret for me of not sticking around. They all walked away with hundreds of thousands of dollars from getting dropped, essentially, because this was in that era where these record deals still existed. This is right before streaming came online, and so it was still more artist friendly than not, even if it failed. So people who don't even really know the scene or Saves the Day do look back on that deal they had as like one of the most used artist friendly ones of that era, right at the end before that all changed.
Holy shit.
Yeah,
Yeah, because then once the label's gone, you don't have to pay anybody back.
that's right. Yeah.
Oh my God. I think another band did that. There was I heard some story. They got like, I don't know if it was Rescue. What the fuck is this band's name? Oh my God. Recover. I thought, like, I talked to someone and I could swear it was like Recover, a band like that. They got like a shit ton of money and then the label just imploded. So they're like, oh, we get to keep this or something like that.
Like magic money a la crypto or something just
Yeah.
comes out of nowhere. No one knows where it goes, but then you walk away with it.
Well, cool, man. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up because I know you gotta bust out, but I've really loved this conversation. I was really excited when you said yeah. So two questions. One, before I ask the last one, what would you like to plug? It could be about you, it could be about a friend, it could be about both.
That is such a good question. In the spirit of this conversation, I want to plug people going on YouTube and looking up Unitarian church shows from the late 90s, because it's like looking back at a lost world, and yet it's the last gasp of a world before the internet and before you just found out about bands by going on Pitchfork. I mean, there's something that's really, really special in that. From that world, a band that I am obsessed with right now, who actually just played at the church. I live in California, so I haven't gotten to see him yet. Is Soul Glo? Have you heard of them?
Soul Glo. Sounds kind of familiar.
They're on Epitaph now. Or no, they're on yeah, I think they're on Epitaph or Fat Wreck now, but they are POC led band from, I think, West Philly, who are the next greatest thing in hardcore, as far as I'm convinced. And they bring in a lot of kind of like industrial, dirty South hip hop stuff in, and they are just next level. Brilliant. Soul Glo. And they got their name from the product and coming to America.
Which is Soul Glo.
Exactly. Super self-aware dudes, and really, really, really great. I really recommend Soul Glo. So that's the band from the scene that I'm tracking these days.
All right. Yeah, it's really hard to find. Not hard to find. I rely on my Spotify Discover Weekly sometimes to go through and find like my new favorite band, even though I think a lot of times it's a total miss where I'm like, this is all garbage.
The algorithm failed you.
Yeah, it's so bad. But there's this band called Johnny Booth that I just found yesterday, and they're brutal.
Yeah?
Yeah. Oh, dude, I was like,
Write
holy
that down.
fuck. Yeah, there's this song called Rebuttal that just blows your fucking dick off.
Okay.
Yeah, it's incredible. So
It's good to have the dick blown off.
Yeah.
Johnny Booth. Okay.
Johnny Booth and Soul Glo. I'll have to look them up. All right, man. So last question. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
That's such a good question. It's tough, like, because I think even over the course of like the period of time we're talking about, Saves the Day and myself lost track of this stuff. So it's actually, as I've been kind of much older, that I feel like I've come full circle kind of to those early, Unitarian church shows and the ethics there. And I think for me, especially at this point in my life, in my 40s, there's something about people, what I appreciate these days most in people that feels like something I learned back then that I forgot. Saves the Day actually led me to forget this a bit, is being very open and direct and honest in communication. And I feel like I got a crash course in that really early on. And then Saves the Day, sadly, I think because we got so caught up in the rock star thing, that it's not about any of that. It's about this whole image and persona, which I really, really reject at this point and feel some regret, even though I know it's not really necessary, but about how much I lost track of these, the importance on being really honest with oneself and others, that I feel like I learned in the scene, and especially in the hardcore scene, that I certainly wasn't. I came from a world where it was all about presentationalism and, trying to get ahead and professionalism, and nothing wrong with all of that, but it's a world that would have led me to a pretty stuck place had I not encountered another way of interacting with humans that came honestly through the scene and being around a lot of people that didn't look like me and didn't come from the world I came from and weren't interested in, just a kind of false self that, growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, like had I not been exposed to that, I think I would have just spent my whole life lost in. Full stop.